From its announcement, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood threatened to be Quentin Tarantino's most self-indulgent work. No matter his choice of subject matter, his love of cinema shines through every single one of his films, and it's actually surprising it's taken this long for him to make a movie about the film industry itself. That initial threat comes true, and this is Tarantino at his most uninhibited. But like Fellini before him, he justifies his excess through the pure artistry of it all. This is the story of fading star Rick Dalton and his stunt double Cliff Booth, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt respectively. One of Tarantino's better talents as a writer is his ability to establish close friendships, and this is one of his tighter bonds. The two characters convincingly have each other's backs, even as the film exposes certain disparities that should drive them apart. Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate lends a certain enigmatic quality to the experience. We never explore her character in the same way we explore the two male leads, but that's the bait of the film. Because we know how her actual story ends, we're constantly thinking about how this story will tackle that subject. Is it going to follow the same path? Is it going to do something different? And this lends a certain idea of what the end game of this movie is going to be, when the other plot threads seem kind of aimless. Tarantino successfully plants this idea in our head from the very beginning. The distance makes sense here. This was a real woman with aspirations of stardom, and she was cut down way before any of us actually got a chance to know her. Most of us have only heard of her as a victim of the Manson family massacre. So, it's a struggle to actually think of her outside of that frame. To be any closer to Tate would read as inauthentic, as the tragic irony here is the only reason we care so much about wanting to get to know her more is because of the fact that we can't. Robbie playing this role so charmingly only makes that harder to swallow. We will never really know Sharon Tate because she is so tangled up in this massacre. While that particular longing plays out on the meta level, that same energy guides the two protagonists. This is a film of people longing for alternative realities. Rick is just desperate for any role that will put him back in the spotlight, and he constantly daydreams of all those movies he almost but did not star in. Cliff, on the other hand, simply is having a hard time finding work at all. He does all these basic tasks around the house for Rick, and doesn't really seem to have much of his own life, and he's desperate to find some sort of situation where he can play the hero, just throwing himself into danger. This mixture of longing and stardom produces a really bittersweet atmosphere. I feel this is Tarantino at his most optimistic, even if he is lamenting a certain loss. It's just these scenes where, say, a child actress commends Dalton for a really good performance on an otherwise really hard day of work, or seeing Sharon Tate sitting in a movie theater and just watching as the audience enjoys her performance. It's just, there's something so inspiring here. And it's only brought down because of these constant reminders that there could have been more. This movie is loaded with scenes that would seem unnecessary if it wasn't for the fact that the minor characters so easily stole the scenes they appear in. Bruce Lee is reimagined as a braggart who constantly finds any opportunity he can to grandstand, and the result is hilarious. There's also that child actor who just talks to Dalton as if she's this grand actress who is just so engaged with method acting, even though she's like 10 years old. And it seems to be this like sly jab at DiCaprio's own experience. Excess works as long as it's fun. Tarantino is desperate for any opportunity to use stylistic flares, and the Hollywood setting is the perfect excuse. The film constantly cuts to Rick Dalton's earlier films, allowing him to play with color and aspect ratio. And even the more mundane scenes are still really well shot. There's long takes, there's jump cuts, and the whole film is loaded with a certain saturation that really sets this as belonging alongside the films of the era it's covering. Tarantino seems very much at home playing around in 1969. Because of this specific era, he is able to again explore his recent fascination with the Western, with his main character being a declining star in the same era as that genre was starting to fade. The sets and costume design all really capture that 1960s spirit, and Tarantino's ear for music makes this such an effective nostalgia piece for an era that I've never lived through. Like the actual Sharon Tate, this is a hard movie to discuss without bringing up the ending, but I'm not going to talk about it here because I don't want to spoil the movie. But this might just be the best ending from a director who always sticks his landing. While I love nearly all of Tarantino's work, they're also all usually at such a distance that they intentionally fall kind of cold. This, on the other hand, is just straightforward emotional. There are times where I felt like crying, even when I was laughing. All of the ambling that the story does is completely justified by the payoff. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is among Tarantino's best because he's able to play with what just might be his favorite subject matter with no reservations. What were once sly nods and winks to a knowing audience now serve as the surface text. This is a work that's joyous and affirming in Tarantino's uniquely twisted way, even as darkness teeters on the edge. The Hollywood system is painted as wondrous as it is frustrating. It's rare that I walk out of a theater longing for more, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood manages that even as it gleefully plays in its own excess.